and there's intimacy on the radio, and there's naturalness on the radio that can never be replicated on TV. The marvelous resurgence of radio as a political force in this country.
News-related radio programming is evolving.
There's a huge hole in our dialogue that can be filled by the synthesis of traditional radio and the freedom that comes from a live podcast. You're about to experience Cowboy State Politics live. Here we go. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to another spectacular installment of Cowboy State Politics Live. From very high above all the puerile and vacuous forms of Wyoming mainstream media, this is Cowboy State Politics. I, of course, am your illustrious host, David Iverson, firmly and permanently ensconced behind the silver Cowboy State Politics microphone and broadcasting to you from the base of the Bighorns at the Cowboy State Politics Studio in Sheridan, Wyoming. Good morning, my friends, and welcome to the program. Happy Thursday. There has been a flurry of activity around the studio today. The morning show was quite the operation. Welcome to all of you that are listening and did listen to the morning show. We found out this morning that Reed Reisner will spare no expense, not pull any punches when it comes to trying to obfuscate what the truth actually is. But he's not alone in trying to do that. There's a long history of politicians that don't want you to know the truth about events that happen or about them, really. And we found out some of those on the morning show. But, my friends, there are bigger fish to fry when it comes to, shall we say, brushing over the truth, reimagining the past, rewriting history, revisionist activities when it comes to history books. One such person, and we're going to begin the program with this because he is a favorite target of mine, is war hero Dick Blumenthal. Yes, now, many of you out in Wyoming radio land may not be all that familiar with war hero Dick Blumenthal, but if you listen to Rush Limbaugh for any length of time, you inevitably heard about him. And of course, he's made a name for himself with all of his military adventures overseas, or maybe not. I'll get to that in a minute. From Breitbart News this morning, war hero Dick Blumenthal. Alito is unfit to serve, and at a minimum, he must recuse himself from all Trump cases. Now, before we get going, and if you're watching on cowboystatepolitics.com, you'll see that I have the Gadsden flag t-shirt on today. It's a little bit wrinkled because I didn't exactly know where we were headed this morning until I found this article. But yes, if you're unfamiliar with the Gadsden flag, it's the one that has the snake on it, and it says, "Don't tread on me." And I must be in the same category as Samuel Alito, though I'm not a Supreme Court justice and he is, and I'm not a well-known author and he is, and I'm not a nationally known conservative, he is. But beyond that, I do have the t-shirts. So I guess you could throw me in the same category as Samuel Alito, at least according to war hero Dick Blumenthal. And I quote, Senator Richard Blumenthal said Wednesday on PMS-NBC's All In that Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito is unfit to serve on the United States Supreme Court. And, honestly, who doesn't want to listen to Richard Blumenthal? The guy is, he's been a long-time United States senator, and there's absolutely no reason whatsoever that we shouldn't pay any attention to him, except, of course, that he's a liar. Anchor Chris Hayes said, and I quote, "I saw some of your comments about the upside-down flag. What is your reaction to this latest story about another right-wing flag flying over Samuel Alito's house? Now, first of all, an upside-down flag, American flag that is a sign of distress. That's the universal distress call on the high seas. So if you've got some problem with your boat and your flag is hanging upside down, everybody knows there's something wrong with the boat and you need help. So that is specifically what an upside down flag is. But Samuel Alito has been under scrutiny because he has another type of flag. Blumenthal said, quote, "I wish I could say I was surprised, but I'm not, because this political statement, make no mistake, this flag is a political statement. It is part of a pattern. The political statement is, in effect, support for Donald Trump. For a religious strand of the steel movement, and for theological vision of what America ought to be and how it ought to be governed, which is okay for Speaker Johnson to fly outside his office. He's a politician." Supreme Court justices are supposed to be above reproach and above politics. He added, and I quote, "I am sad, really, really sad and shocked to say that Justice Alito is rapidly showing himself to be unfit to serve in the United States Supreme Court. At a minimum, he has to recuse himself from these cases coming before the court that will determine whether or not Trump is held accountable." All right, so let's just talk about flags and about what war hero Dick Blumenthal said. Now, he's suggesting that Supreme Court justices can't have political opinions. I, however, think that that's absolutely ridiculous. As long as they're fair and unbiased on the court, why shouldn't Supreme Court justices have opinions? I mean, after all, we have a justice that is... whoa, excuse me, wrong soundbite. We have a justice, not a justice, but a judge, rather, that is presiding over a case that is unprecedented in American history. That is, the guy that's overseeing the Trump case. And he definitely has some political opinions of his own. Most notably, that it's okay for his daughter to engage in all sorts of political fundraising. Yeah, the judge's daughter, Judge Merchan, is actively engaged in the Joe Biden campaign. Now, why is it that Judge Merchan can have political opinions, but Justice Samuel Alito cannot? Absolutely ridiculous, my friends, and we shouldn't even pay any attention to what Dick Blumenthal has to say. I'll get to him in just a second. But again, the flag. Now, a lot of us have flags hanging around outside of our homes and our businesses. There's flags hanging outside of City Hall. And let's be honest, if there was an upside down flag hanging outside of City Hall, we would all think that something was wrong. And we are in Wyoming, and we know that a lot of city and county governments are overwhelmingly liberal, so it would be absolutely appropriate to hang an upside down flag. But that is not the flag that Samuel Alito has flying outside of his house, out of his home. It is the Appeal to Heaven flag. I'll get to that in just a second, but I want you to hear Dick Blumenthal in his own words, war hero Dick Blumenthal, saying that Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito is unfit to serve. Here you go.
I did. Senator Richard Blumenthal is a Democrat of Connecticut who sits on the Judiciary Committee, and he joins me now. Senator, I saw some of your comments about the upside-down flag. What's your reaction to this latest story about this other right-wing flag flying over another Alito house?
I wish I could say I was surprised, but I'm not, because this political statement, make no mistake, this flag is a political statement, is part of a pattern. This political statement is, in effect, support for Donald Trump, for a religious strand of the Stop the Steal movement, and for a theological vision of what America ought to be and how it ought to be governed, which is okay for Speaker Johnson to fly outside his office. He's a politician. But Supreme Court justices are supposed to be above reproach and above politics. And I am sad, really sad.
I'm sad
and
too,
shocked
Dick.
to say that Justice Alito is rapidly showing himself to be unfit to serve on the United States Supreme Court. At a very minimum, he has to recuse himself from these cases now coming before the court that will determine whether or not.
All right. That's enough of war hero Dick Blumenthal. So the flag that Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito has flying out of outside of one of his home is the Appeal to Heaven flag. You know, the white one, it's got the pine tree on it, and it says an appeal to heaven. But to fully grasp the meaning of the pine tree flag, one has to go back in history to the times of kings and queens. Namely, the people were taught that the king or queen had the divine right to rule. Hence, any action against them would be considered an ultimate sin, a rebellion against heaven, a devil's work. In order to justify the American fight for freedom from this common point of view, British philosopher John Locke gave his opinion against the theory of the divine right in his second treatise on civil government. In short, Locke explained that if the appeal on earth fails, the people have to appeal to heaven for justice and guidance. And if they can't fulfill a just cause by appealing to earthly laws and rulers, they can make an appeal to heaven to reach justice. Naturally, John Locke was very popular among American freedom fighters at the time of the Revolution. And if anybody in this century had any sense whatsoever, they would be a fan of John Locke too. But almost all of the official documents of the United States were based, at least in part, on John Locke's work. Now, to sum it all up, all of the above, all the things I just mentioned, led to the adoption of the Appeal to Heaven flag on October 21st of 1775, as George Washington needed a flag for the commissioned ships. The pine tree flag designer was Washington's secretary, Colonel Joseph Reed. Just a year after, in 1776, the Appeal to Heaven flag was adopted as the state's Navy flag. And so the flag that war hero Dick Blumenthal says is absolutely a political statement really is no different than the Navy Jack. You know, the one with the red and white stripes that has the snake on it and says, "Don't tread on me." Or the Gadsden flag, which I am proudly wearing today on Cowboy State Politics Live. The truth is that Richard Blumenthal ought to recuse himself from any association with the United States Congress, because it was him who lied about his service record. That's why I refer to him as war hero Dick Blumenthal. From the Connecticut Times, an affiliate of NBC. Contrary to his claims, Connecticut Attorney General war hero Dick Blumenthal never served in Vietnam. Published on May 17th of 2010. Connecticut Attorney General and leading Democratic candidate for the United States Senate, Richard Blumenthal, never served in Vietnam, a revelation that contradicts a central claim in Blumenthal's political narrative, according to a news report. A New York Times investigation found that Blumenthal received at least 5 military deferments from 1965 to 1970, and records show he enlisted in the Marine Reserve, a move that virtually guaranteed that he would not be sent to Vietnam, according to the New York Times. The military record also suggests that Blumenthal made every effort to avoid going to war, the Times found. The embarrassing findings are fully against what has become an accepted belief about the state's top prosecutor, that he served, get this, as a Marine sergeant during the war. Quote, "We have learned something important since the days I served in Vietnam," Blumenthal said to a pro-military group at an event in Norwalk in March of 2008, the Times reported. "And you exemplified, whatever we think about the war, whatever we call it, Afghanistan or Iraq, we owe our military men and women unconditional support." That quote, or quotation rather, was among several from public events where Blumenthal spoke of his purported military service. The investigation also quoted from newspaper and magazine profiles of the candidate that highlighted his status as a veteran of the war. Now, just a quick aside. That story was published in numerous magazines all across the country, and not a single journalist at any of those magazines even thought, well, you know, maybe we ought to check out this guy's military service record, until much later that the New York Times picked it up. So listen to this next part. Quote, "Sometimes his remarks have been plainly untrue, as in his speech to the group in Norwalk. the Times reported. At other times, he has used more ambiguous language, but the impression left on audiences can be similar. In an interview with the New York Times, Blumenthal acknowledged that he had misspoken about his service, but denied intentionally lying about it. Now, wait a minute. If you claim to be a Marine sergeant in front of a group of people, that's not misspeaking. That's called lying, something which war hero Dick Blumenthal is very familiar. Quote from the war hero himself. My intention has always been to be completely clear and accurate and straightforward out of respect to the veterans who actually, no, it doesn't say actually, who served in Vietnam, he told the paper. Later, campaign manager Mindy Myers released a statement slamming the Times story as a, quote, an outrageous distortion of Dick Blumenthal's record of service. Here's what she said. Unlike many of his peers, Dick Blumenthal voluntarily joined the Marine Corps Reserves in 1970 and served for 6 months in Parris Island, South Carolina, and 6 years in the reserves, the statement said. He received no special treatment from anyone except 5 military deferments. Dick has a long record of standing up for veterans. Tomorrow, veterans will be standing up with Dick. Yeah, I don't really think so. The truth is that Dick Blumenthal is a liar, just like a whole bunch of politicians in each and every state in the country. Now, Dick Blumenthal went on to win that race for the United States Senate, but it will never erase how many lies he told about not serving in Vietnam. Now, he may have served in the Marine Corps Reserves, but he was never deployed overseas. And I know a lot of military veterans and families that would be absolutely outraged to hear that he is calling for Justice Alito to step down for flying a flag, a George Washington flag, outside of his home. Absolutely ridiculous, but what do you expect from redcoat politicians? You never can figure them out. Anyway, let's take a quick break. And then we're going to move into an interesting article I found about a Jesuit journal that has joined with atheists in trashing Harrison Butker, the kicker from the Kansas City Chiefs, who gave a speech saying that, maybe we should just have strong families. Anyway, we'll talk about that next.
Where am I to go now that I've gone too far? I'm stepping into the twilight zone. This is the madhouse, feels like Vietnam. My freedom's been moved on the moon and stars. Where am I to go now that I've gone too far? You will come to go when the bullet hits the bone. So you will come to go when the bullet hits the bone. When the bullet hits the bone.
You are listening to Cowboy State Politics Live on the Independence Network. You're not going to find a selection of better news, entertainment, and commentary than right here on the Independence Network, with great voices like Joey Carenti from Just Blame Joey, Ken Pendergraft from The Ramble Room, Tom Kelly from Wide Right Turn, and the lovely Christine from The Hair Affair. And of course, my program, Cowboy State Politics, Wyoming's most listened to political program. Also, don't forget to check out the article section at the website, independencenetwork.us. It's loaded with op-eds, commentary, and news from all around the Cowboy State. You can listen to the Cowboy State Politics podcast anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest place is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. That way, if your name is Joe Biden and you can't remember if you had your pudding today, well, I probably can't help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president. And now, back to our program.
I remember I was 8 years old with a blank tape waiting by the radio. Come on, man, play Back in Black. I want to play it back on repeat. I remember Panama City, long nights with the girl named Christy. She took me down to the Paradise City, then up on Cripple Creek. Still something about a guitar cranked up, head banging to the beat of the bass drum. Still something about a sold-out show in the second row with your girl on your shoulder. Still something about raising a cold beer when the lights go down and the crowd cheers. From Delta Soul to Abbey Road, sweet child to sweet home. Still something about rock and roll, rock and roll. Still something about rock and roll, rock and roll, rock and roll. I saw a Journey in the big Coliseum. No dancing, no lip syncing. I tell you this, don't fight the feeling.
Welcome back to the program, my friends. David Iverson, Cowboy, State Politics Live, documented to be almost always right, just about 99% of the time. I haven't run the numbers lately, but it's darn close. A record that nobody in the Wyoming mainstream media should even try to come close to, because frankly, they can't. So before the break, I was telling you about an article I found on Breitbart that a Jesuit journal. Now, Jesuits, of course, is a group of Catholic priests. They're the people that educate. I went to a Jesuit university, Regis University, down in Denver. Well, they've joined with atheists in trashing Harrison Butker. And I quote from American Magazine: "The United States Jesuit flagship publication has joined with atheists and liberal elites in blasting star NFL kicker Harrison Butker for his conservative Catholic-themed commencement address at Benedictine College." Zach Davis, an associate editor at America, wrote that Butker's speech sounded like the result of a, quote, an all-encompassing ideology which explains why gender roles, COVID-19 policies, liturgical preferences, and abortion should all fall under the same coherent theme of a commencement address. The ideology espoused by Mr. Butker goes beyond legitimate conservative liberal differences, Davis argued, and fell into the backward-looking sectarianism that, quote, Pope Francis has worried about repeatedly throughout his papacy. There is the fashion in this age of church's life to, quote, step back, not going up or down, but backwards, Davis wrote, citing Pope Francis. This backstepping makes us a sect. It makes you closed and cuts off your horizons. Davis took advantage of his piece to join with the Associated Press in slamming Benedictine College itself, a small conservative liberal arts college located in Atchison, Kansas. Quote, Benedictine College was recently featured in a report from the Associated Press under the headline, quote, a step back in time. America's Catholic Church sees an immense shift toward the old ways, Davis noted. At Benedictine, Catholic teaching on contraception can slip into lessons on Plato, and no one is surprised if you volunteer for 3 a.m. prayers. Davis quoted from the AP article, pornography, premarital sex, and sunbathing in swimsuits are forbidden. As Catholic League President Bill Donahue observed, quote, it is striking to see people like Whoopi Goldberg and Bill Maher speak in defense of Harrison Butker while Catholics at America criticize him. Well, absolutely, this Jesuit journal is wrong from the very beginning. The only thing that Harrison Butker did was stand up for traditional values and his own beliefs, which are taught at Benedictine College. And there is this real, aversion to anything that even resembles traditional values in the American mainstream press. None of them want to admit that any of that was actually good. Instead, they're in favor of this current LGBTQ agenda, LGBTQ ZXPWD agenda, that you should have premarital sex with anybody that you want, and that abortion should be available upon demand. None of these things are Catholic. None of these things are Jesuit. And Harrison Butker, it was absolutely right in talking to newly graduated college students about how to have a successful and fulfilling relationship and family. The truth is, my friends, our culture is quickly moving towards an anti-Christian approach. And when you've got Jesuit magazines that are going along with it, I mean, I don't know how much more evidence that you need. There's an article in the Cowboy State Daily today about an atheist who's suing to have his atheist commandments or atheist principles right alongside the 10 Commandments in a park in downtown Gillette. My friends, there has never been a time, well, I shouldn't say that. There hasn't been a time for quite some time that we've needed traditional values more than we do right now. That the best place to raise children is a home with a mother and a father, and that how that family chooses to conduct their business is entirely theirs. It doesn't need the school system, the government, or anybody else telling us how to run our families or to raise our children. But the problem is that all of these elitists in the mainstream media and apparently at this Jesuit journal want to be able to tell Americans how they can live their lives and more specifically how they can raise their children. Right now in the studio, I'm looking at an issue of the New American, and on the front page it says defending children. Well, the reason is we have to. We are facing an all-out assault from the American left on the American school. It's been happening for, I don't know, probably over 100 years, perhaps longer, when Jefferson Davis first came up with the idea of the Department of Education. Yeah, it goes back way before Jimmy Carter, by the way. But our schools are no longer educating students, they're indoctrinating them. And now churches are trying to get in the middle of it. In fact, just last night at Bible study, we talked about different denominations and how, and we've got a couple different people from different denominations in town that come to our church every now and again. But the point was that we have to settle on what is the truth. It's not your truth. It's not my truth. There's no truth that is arbitrary anywhere else. There's only one truth, my friends. And in my life, that's the word of God and that of Jesus Christ. And so unless we can settle on what the truth is, we're going to continue to see these divisions and amazingly have parts of the Catholic Church attack people for their religious views. Absolutely amazing. Another thing that's kind of incredible is this next article from Breitbart, and they're talking about NBC's rule. That's a commentator on NBC. The title is Biden is buying votes with a loan plan, but the GOP does that by letting people keep more of their own money. And the amazing part of this soundbite is when she just says, well, isn't this how politics works? Let's listen to the soundbite and then we'll talk about it.
Yes, in this idea that if these false narratives continue to propel and spew sort of misinformation and disinformation, eventually it just makes it harder to get people to revert to what is actually the truth. And, we're going to get past Donald Trump at some point in our political lives. And at that point, we're going to have to start putting truth back into our dialogue and truth back into our governing. And the longer this goes on, the longer that project will take.
Before I let you guys go, Matthew, let's talk about Joe Biden and this student debt relief, right? We're seeing Republicans push so hard against it, saying Joe Biden is buying votes. If he's doing this for college grads, what about all the people who don't go to college? They get nothing. They're left out. Isn't that how politics works? The carried interest loophole only helps the private equity industry. It doesn't help us. Corporate tax cuts only helps corporations. It doesn't help the rest of us. When Donald Trump goes down to Mar-a-Lago and says, I'm going to lower your taxes, he's lowering the taxes of the richest of the rich people. So this whole you're buying votes, isn't this just how politics works? Fulfilling campaign.
No, that's how Democrat politics works. Now let's just talk about for a second what PMS NBC's rule was saying. Isn't this how politics works? Well, first of all, when you apply for a student loan, that's a choice that you make. You want to go somewhere and attend a school, but you need more money to do it. And so you make an agreement with a lender so that you can go to school and you're going to repay that loan. Nobody's forcing you to. Nobody's putting a gun to your head and saying, sign at the bottom of the piece of paper. Nobody's doing that. It's your choice. And so when Biden comes along with his student loan forgiveness, it's not that and maybe I should draw this comparison a little bit out, but he's saying that we're going to forgive a choice that you made. And it's not really forgive. You're putting the price tag of all those student loans on the backs of people who actually pay taxes. But that means that you don't have to take responsibility for a choice that you made, money that you spent. Now, tax cuts are something entirely different. If the government is taxing more money than it absolutely needs, that's called legalized theft. You're not forgiving anything. You're just saying that the government doesn't need that much money, and so that you can keep it. That's not buying votes. The difference here is Joe Biden is literally exchanging money in return for votes. That's what it is. And there's a reason why Joe Biden has been so insistent upon this so-called student loan forgiveness plan, because he knows that it will probably get him votes from younger Americans, a demographic that he is struggling with right now. His approval ratings have been going down into the cellar with people aged 18 to 35. And so he's hoping that this student loan forgiveness scheme is going to buy him some votes. And that's literally what it is. And so, no, this isn't exactly how politics works. Let's take another break, and then we'll come back to it. And we're going to talk about the newest lawsuit from the Department of Justice. It's spring in the Cowboy State, or as Albert Sommers likes to say, spring-ish. Time to get the motorcycle out of the garage, time to go up the mountain, time to get outside and tromp around. And when you're doing that, you still want to make sure that you take care of your feet. The best way that you can do that is order a pair of Kenai boot socks from the Buffalo Wool Company. I know, your mama always told you that wool socks are only to be worn during the winter. But times have changed, my friends. The Kenai boot socks from the Buffalo Wool Company will not only keep your feet nice and toasty warm, they'll keep them cool and dry in the summer. Trust me, these are the most incredible socks that you're ever going to put on your feet. To get you a pair, go to their website, thebuffalowoolco.com. You're definitely not going to be disappointed. Wyoming is one of the most sought-after places to live. There's a lot of people that want to move to our great state. And if you're thinking about selling your house to one of them, you need a real estate agent that you can trust. That agent is Rebecca Bextel at Compass Real Estate. She's lived in Jackson for almost 20 years and has her fingers on the pulse of the real estate market. Last year, she sold almost $25 million worth of property. So if you're thinking of buying or selling, give Rebecca a call. Her phone number is 307-699-3519.
I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day, don't you? Well, I can show you how. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. A new day, a new way. Watch out, I'm only gonna get stronger. I've never felt the freedom like I do. I feel stronger every day. I'm only gonna get stronger.
Watch out. Cowboy State Politics and the Independence Network are only going to get stronger. With great voices like Tom Kelly, Joey Correnti, Ken Pendergraft, the lovely Christine, and of course, my program, Cowboy State Politics Live. Welcome back to the show, my friends. We're burning through another busy broadcast hour on the Independence Network, executing host duties flawlessly with talent given to me by God himself. It's absolutely right, my friends. We all should be thankful each and every day for the talents that we've been given. And apparently, mine is this program. Now, before the break, I alluded to an article about the DOJ targeting more pro-life activists. Now, this is absolutely amazing. When the DOJ could be out, chasing actual criminals, murderers, thieves, politicians, Hunter Biden. Instead, they're trying to dredge up old offenses for people who really shouldn't be charged with the crime at all. Now, if you'll recall, it was only, I think, last month where a couple of pro-life activists were charged under the Obscure Face Act, which is the Freedom of Access to Clinic Entrances Act, or in other words, the law that prevents people from standing in your way to get in to kill your baby. That's right. It all deals with abortion clinics. Well, on Monday, the DOJ announced a lawsuit against two pro-life organizations, Citizens for a Pro-Life Society and Red Rose Rescue, and 7 pro-life activists on allegations that they violated the FACE Act, get this, 3 years ago. Quote, "It's ridiculous that Biden's Department of Justice is going after pro-life Americans but letting criminals and dangerous illegal aliens roam free on the streets." Now, the allegations are, and the lawsuit claims, that the defendants engaged in a physical obstruction at 2 Ohio abortion clinics on June 4th of 2021 and June 5th of 2021. Now, the last few people that were sentenced and sent to prison for multiple years were only singing carols in the hallway outside of an abortion clinic. And then it didn't stop anybody from going in. They were just there. They were singing hymns, not carols. Got it a little mixed up, but some carols are hymns. Never mind me getting caught up on semantics. But the only thing these people did were singing hymns outside of the abortion clinic, and they were prosecuted for that, and they were sent to prison for multiple years. So in this last incident, the defendants allegedly entered a clinic's waiting room and encouraged pregnant women not to get abortions. The lawsuit claims that the defendants refused to leave when asked. Police eventually arrived and physically removed the pro-life activists from the waiting room. The lawsuit alleges the protest disrupted the clinic's appointment schedule, forcing some women to reschedule their surgical abortions to different days. In the second incident, the defendants allegedly approached abortion-seeking women in the parking lot of a Planned Parenthood surgery center and urged them not to get abortions. The lawsuit claims the defendants obstructed the clinic and cars in the parking lot and alleges the pro-life activists refused to leave when instructed by police. Now, there's a couple of problems with this. The FACE Act prevents you from interfering with people entering into an abortion clinic. So in other words, if there's a sidewalk that leads directly to the front door of an abortion clinic, you can't stand on the sidewalk and prevent somebody from entering into the door. You can, however, stand on the grass beside the sidewalk and sing hymns or pray. But as we learned from the most recent incident, singing hymns probably will get you arrested. Now, in this last case, talking to people in a parking lot is not necessarily obstructing them from entering into an abortion clinic. It's the parking lot outside the clinic. Doesn't have anything to do with the entrance of the abortion clinic, which is what the FACE Act refers to. Because of those alleged actions, the clinic was forced to shut down for the day. And we're talking about the folks in the parking lot. And police probably asked them to shut it down, interrupting 9 scheduled quote-unquote surgeries. That would be murders because they're abortions, the lawsuit says. Miller, director of Citizens for a Pro-Life Society, and one of the defendants named in the lawsuit, disputed the government's allegations. Quote, "We do not use any form of physical obstruction. There is no restriction of freedom of movement for women seeking to kill their unborn children or abortion center staff. The DOJ's complaint totally falsifies and mischaracterizes what we do," she explained. "The rescuers simply enter the waiting room, sit down quietly, and talk to the moms, offering them material assistance and, of course, red roses. We feel confident that we will prevail against this bogus initiative to intimate peaceful pro-lifers trying to help moms and save unborn from the violent acts of destruction. In a statement, Assistant Attorney General Kristen Clark boasted that the DOJ is committed to enforcing the FACE Act to protect those seeking access to reproductive health care services. So let's talk about that phrase for just a second. Reproductive health care. Well, reproductive means that you're going to produce another living human being, and health care would be seeing to the health of your reproduction, or that is your child. The whole phrase means that you're seeing to the health care of unborn children. It is not reproductive to kill another innocent human being. That's called murder. The left uses terms to lead you to believe that things are something that they're not. For example, why do we use the word abortion? Well, it's a clinical term. When I think of abortion, I think of somebody's going up in the space shuttle and something goes wrong and they try to hit the red button, abort the mission. So it's clinical. It allows us to talk about a horrible thing without throwing up in our mouths a little bit. But I say, let's just call it what it is, and that is killing babies. So if the Department of Justice wants to enforce the FACE Act, why don't they just call it what it is? We're in favor of killing more babies because that is the terminal result. Now, let's bring this back home to Wyoming right now. There are two bills or laws that are being challenged in court right now. Teton County Judge Melissa Owens has yet to make a decision on the trigger law, which is, pretty much it's a moot point right now because the legislature passed the Life is a Human Right Act. And that one, it kind of makes the trigger bill sort of meaningless. Well, the problem, all of the arguments against that thing were, well, we have to allow access to women's health care. Well, it's not women's health care. It's killing a baby. And secondly, if you're pregnant, you have another living being inside your body growing. So it's not two human beings you're dealing with. It's not one human being. It's two human beings that you're dealing with. And nobody has a right to take the life of another innocent human being. And so the FACE Act, which we do have at least one abortion clinic in Wyoming, has resulted in the deaths of verifiably at least 100 babies in our great state. My friends, abortion is an archaic practice. It's a horrible one. It's absolutely murder. And we have to do everything we can to stop it. Since it's an election year, you should ask candidates how they stand on abortion. And if they're not 100% pro-life, you should just tell them, sorry, I'm not voting for you. If we can't agree on that one thing, that it's wrong to kill a baby, then there's very little else that we're going to agree on. And secondly, I would question the person's values if they're in favor of abortion in any way, shape, or form. It's one of those things that is an absolute horror show in our society. The Supreme Court was absolutely right in the Dobbs decision that you don't have a right to an abortion. And if states want to legalize abortion, well, that's a different story. But there's no federal right to an abortion. Nowhere is it listed in the Constitution. It didn't belong in the 14th Amendment in the first place. That was an absolutely partisan, wrong-headed decision from the Supreme Court from the very beginning. So anyway, I'm going to keep following this abortion thing. If you've listened to Cowboy State Politics for any length of time, you'll know that anytime a story comes up like this, I am totally willing to talk about it because, I can't imagine wanting to kill another innocent human being. Now, as it relates to reproductive health care, which again, we just talked about how that phrase is a fallacy in and of itself. There's a reproductive health clinic in Sheridan, and outside they have a pride flag hanging right on the front of the building. Now, just a question here. If you're not heterosexual, it is absolutely impossible for you to reproduce. If you're going to become pregnant, we have to do it through the natural procedure, the way that all of us were born. And interestingly enough, even if you're one of those people that goes to a reproductive healthcare center that outside has a pride flag hanging, you really ought to thank your heterosexual parents for bringing you into the world. But my point in bringing all this up is to point out the contradiction that why do they have a pride flag hanging out of a reproductive healthcare system, something that if you're part of that community, you really don't have to worry about reproducing. Or do I have that wrong? Let's go to our last break, and then we'll finish up the program.
I'm driving black on black. Just got my license back. I've got this feeling in my face. This train is coming off the track. I'll ask the light if the devil needs a ride because the angel of my ride ain't hanging out with me tonight. I'm driving past your house while you was thinking out. I got the car door opened up so you can jump in on the run. Your mom don't know that you were missing. She'd be pissed if she could see the parts of you that I've been kissing, screaming, oh, we're never gonna quit. Ain't nothing wrong with it. Just acting like we're animals. No matter where we go, 'cause everybody knows we're just a couple animals. So come on, baby, get in. Get in, just get in. Check out the trouble we're in.
You can listen to Cowboy State Politics live every Monday through Friday at 9 a.m. on the Independence Network. You're not going to find a better source of news, entertainment, and commentary than on Cowboy State Politics Live. You know, the program you're listening to right now. And frankly, why would you want to look anywhere else anyway? Let's be honest, only a liberal redcoat commie would do that. And if you want to listen to my podcast, you can find it at cowboystatepolitics.com or anywhere that you get your podcasts. iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, really any of them will work. But the easiest way is just to go to the website, cowboystatepolitics.com. There you can find all of the shows, as well as any of the articles that I might bring up during the course of a program. If your name is Sleepy Joe Biden and you can't remember if you put socks on this morning or not, well, I can't really help you with that, but I can definitely tell you why you should have never ran for president of the United States. And now, back to the program. Welcome back to the program. David Iverson, Cowboy State Politics Live. Thank you very much for listening to this program and to the Independence Network. Without you, we wouldn't have anything to do. Now, a couple of updates about the program. If you missed yesterday's installment of the podcast, I highly suggest you go back and listen to it. It is an excellent interview with attorney and founder of the Center for American Liberty, Harmeet Dillon. If you're unfamiliar with Ms. Dillon, she is the reason why President Donald Trump is still on the Colorado ballot. She's defended Trump in numerous court actions. It's a fascinating discussion. And she has a couple things to say that even surprised me. So make sure that you go check out the podcast. And actually, I'm going to replay that episode at 3:00 on the Independence Network just to make sure that everybody gets a chance to listen to it. I have to tell you, my friends, I think it's one of the best interviews that I've done. But, you know, there's been 680 some episodes of Cowboy State Politics. So, I mean, there's a long list. Now, yesterday on the program, I briefly mentioned this story. And I think it's one that's extraordinarily important, that the United States federal budget has crossed a very, very bad milestone as interest payments on our debt have overtaken defense spending. Now, I just barely touched on this article yesterday, but let's get into it since we've got about 10 minutes left in the program. The United States has long had the world's biggest defense budget, with spending this year set to approach $900 billion. Yet this spending is rapidly being eclipsed by the fastest growing portion of federal outflows, interest payments on the national debt. Now, just think about that, my friends. The biggest expenditure in the United States is not defense any longer. It's not Social Security. It's not Medicare. It's not welfare. It's not any of those things. it's interest payments on the debt. Now, let me just think about this in terms of your own household. If you're spending more on interest than you are on food, you have a serious problem in your household, and you are effectively broke. Now, the economics of the United States are really not all that different than the economics of your own home, with one big difference. The United States can print its own money, but it can't do that with impunity, my friends. Sometime, somewhere, somebody's going to have to pay the piper. For the first 7 months of fiscal year 2024, which we began last October, net interest payments totaled $514 billion, outpacing defense by $20 billion. Budget analysts think that the trend will continue, making 2024 the first year ever that the United States will spend more on interest than on national defense. Now, this has some ramifications that go far beyond just inflation. Now, inflation is bad enough, but what the United States has been doing is just hitting the print button anytime they want to spend money. And this is equivalent to you, say, I don't know, getting a new credit card and just transferring a balance. Okay, so you haven't eclipsed any of that debt. You've just kind of transferred it to another lender so that you can spend more money on the credit card that you already ran up. And when your obligations are bigger than your income, there isn't a bank anywhere that's going to give you any sort of loan. I should know. I just went to the bank yesterday and applied for a loan for something I'm going to have done. And, they looked at my finances, looked at my credit, and thank goodness my credit is stellar enough that it's no problem. But it's because I don't owe a ton of money, unlike the U.S. federal government. Well, there are big names in U.S. politics, U.S. business that are sounding an alarm on those. And one of those is J.P. Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon. And he says that we can't rule out a hard landing for the United States and that stagflation will be the worst outcome. This is from CNBC this morning, and I quote, J.P. Morgan Chase's chairman and CEO Jamie Dimon says a hard landing for the U.S. cannot be ruled out. When asked by CNBC's Shri Jaraj, about the prospect of a hard landing, Dimon replied, could we actually see one? Of course. How could anyone who reads history say that there's no chance? The CEO was speaking at the J.P. Morgan Global China Summit in Shanghai. Dimon said the worst outcome for the U.S. economy will be a stagflation scenario where inflation continues to rise, but growth slows amid high unemployment. Quote, I look at the range of outcomes, and again, the worst outcome for us is what you would call stagflation, higher rates, recession. That means corporate profits will go down, and we'll get through all of that. I mean, the world has survived that, but I just think the odds have been higher than other people think. However, Dimon said, the consumer is still in good shape. He pointed to the unemployment rate, which has been below 4% for about 2 years, adding that wages, home prices, and stock prices have been going up. Well, the reason, and I disagree on a couple of points here. One of the reasons that the stock market is going up is because of a whole bunch of free money floating around. When investors see the availability of getting cash that's been printed, by the way, they're going to do that. And you do that by buying and selling stocks. And so just because the stock market is going up, that's not all that reflective of the actual health of the economy. Really, it might be kind of, a harbinger of things to come. It was not that long ago when the stock market was only at 20,000. It's only been a few years. And now we're up at 40,000. That's what you call inflation, my friends. There's so much money floating around in business, in banking, that businesses can't help but, create and grow. But that growth is artificial because it's being driven by inflation. Jamie went on to say, that said, Dimon pointed out that consumer confidence levels are low. Quote, and listen to this, it seems to be mostly because of inflation. The extra money from COVID, money printing, has been coming down. It's still there, at the bottom 50%. It's kind of gone. So it's, I'm going to call it normal, not bad. Minutes from the Fed's May meeting released Wednesday showed that policymakers have grown more concerned about inflation, with members of the Federal Open Market Committee indicating they lacked confidence to ease monetary policy and cut rates. Whenever you hear somebody say monetary policy, what that means is money printing. So what they're saying is they're lacking confidence that the Fed is going to ease monetary policy. In other words, the Fed is going to continue to spend money, and they're going to continue to print money and spend it, and they're not going to cut interest rates. What interest rates are is a tool to take excess money out of circulation to drive up prices. It's supply and demand, my friends. Literally, what inflation is too many dollars chasing too few of goods. And so the more money you print, the more expensive things are, because it's not like things cost the same when there's more money floating around. You have to have more money to buy the same goods. That's called inflation. So let me just give you a scenario, and I use this one all the time. Let's say that you have a gold dollar 100 years ago. What could you buy with it? Well, you could probably buy 2 pretty nice suits with that gold dollar. Now, what about 200 years ago? You could probably buy 2 pretty nice suits with that gold dollar. Now, fast forward all the way to today. What could you buy with your gold dollar? I mean, gold is at about $3,000 an ounce. You would think that you would be able to buy a whole bunch of crazy stuff. You're still only going to be able to buy 2 pretty nice suits. You see, it's not the value of gold that's changed. It's the value of the dollar, and the value of the dollar is driven by money printing. If we're going to print more, the value of it goes down. And the truth is, in the last 3 years, your bank account has lost 15% of its value, all of it due to inflation. Anybody who tries to convince you that inflation is merely just rising prices is full of crap, my friends. Inflation is money printing. It's injecting money into the system, which necessarily makes prices go up. So when you've got big CEOs like Jamie Dimon saying bad things are coming, we should probably pay attention to them. Last up, and I wanted to leave you kind of on a funny note here. So Trump has revealed the new debate format for the upcoming showdown with sleepy Joe Biden. And, you know, we all kind of thought that maybe Joe Biden would have at least one more demand. And he has. Donald Trump revealed Wednesday that he has agreed to, quote, sit at a table with Joe Biden, despite his strong preference to stand during their upcoming debates. The seated format was a request made by the 81-year-old president's campaign team, according to Trump. Quote, I hear we're now sitting at tables. I don't want to sit at a table, the 77-year-old former president told John Katsimatis and Rita Cosby during an appearance on the Katz and Cosby show on WABC 770 AM. I said, no, let's stand, but they want to sit at a table, Trump said. So we'll be sitting at a table as opposed to doing it the way it ought to be, in my opinion, in a debate. Well, we just only have to ask the question, why does President Sleepy Joe Biden want to sit at the table? It's because he's old and he's elderly, and he probably couldn't stand there for 90 minutes at a time. And if he's sitting down, there's more of a likelihood that there can be a microphone hidden around him somewhere, like Donna Brazile admitted to doing during the last election. And the first one's on CNN, so why wouldn't we think that Donna Brazile could be up to her old tricks? Well, we burned through another busy broadcast hour on the program. Wide Right Turn with Joey Correnti and Tom Kelly is up next. Stay tuned to the Independence Network, and I'll see you tomorrow.